Awesome. All right, everybody, welcome to our, what's this, the number 4th one? Is it 4th or 5th?
Wow, I think it is 4.
I think it's 4th.
It's 4th. It's only the second one I think.
All right, so my name is Terry. Carla's also on the call, and we're kind of facilitating this group to help people get their admin certification. So today's topics, actually I'm on the wrong slide, is standard and custom objects. We have a variety of different topics there that we'll go through today, and 2 of our presenters are actually here in the room with me, so that'll be fun. And one thing I wanted to go over, because I know there was some confusion a little bit around topics that will be being presented, and I have the spreadsheet that showed who was presenting when and what dates and what topics you'd be presenting on. We've had some people drop out of the group, so I've had to shift that a little bit. So if you find yourself in a different spot, definitely keep your eye on that spreadsheet. I promise not to throw something at you last minute. And if it is uncomfortable for you to switch to a different topic, just let us know, and we'll definitely try to make some arrangements there to.
Is it too late to say I'm uncomfortable with my topic?
Yeah, me too.
I'm uncomfortable with you having a topic. We're all good. All right, so any questions with how things are going so far? If not, I will go ahead and stop sharing, and I think, Kevin, you're first up, right?
I believe so. Let me share the screen. And let me know if you're seeing.
Yep. Blue slide.
Okay. Yes, blue slide, Salesforce Blue.
Nice.
Okay, I'm going to talk about standard Salesforce object architecture and relationship model. This is how objects relate to each other and how data flows back and forth, and it can affect how you see things, how things are reported, how you gain access to records through security modeling, also deleting records. These are all considerations when trying to decide how you want your objects to relate to each other. So I didn't realize that there was this many types. Most people that I've talked to, and most things that I did on research were basically only talking about what are the first 3 in this list that I have. But Salesforce specifically, when I was doing research, talked about all 6 of these. So I thought I would at least outline them. We don't have to go in depth on some of the ones that are not utilized as often. But I would say that the first 3 on this list are used quite often, and I know I've used all of them. So, but as I was talking before, how objects relate to each other affects many, many different things, and how data is layered, reported upon, securitized, all of those things. But the part of this discussion is kind of around data modeling in general, so it's kind of like a database topic. So it's just, it's a little bit more generalized than specific only to Salesforce. I'll also, mention a few things that are Salesforce specific, like limitations around these different types of things. But the first one is a master detail relationship. So in a master detail relationship, there's a controlling object, and then which is a parent object, and then there's a child object. And the biggest thing to remember about this, or in most cases, at least in my case, it has been when you establish this, you really need to be thinking about when records are removed. That seems to have the biggest impact, at least it has for me, when you're deleting a master record. If you don't specify, you are not able to repair it. So there are cases when you create the relationship, which you do through creating a field, which is the lookup. You can actually state that if a record is deleted, you want it to be able to be reparented. But you have to specify that. Otherwise, it just the basic relationship as it stands, if you don't do anything, will, if you delete the master record, the child records go with it as well. So you can only have, and also on a master detail relationship, that's the only way you can get roll-ups. So you can do roll-up fields to get some different values, min, sum, average of the child records, but you can only do it at the master, in a master detail relationship. So you can have two lookups on one object. You have to have a parent on a child record. It's required. And then if you have access from a security standpoint at the parent's record, it automatically grants you child access, which actually is very beneficial in some scenarios for security reasons. Having less do less sharing rules and settings and things of that nature. If a child is related to a parent, it cannot be, can only be related to one parent. And then you have to have the lookup on page layouts in this case.
What's the up to two lookups are allowed on one object? The first bullet. Two lookups.
I'm going to have to go back and look at my notes.
Okay.
I may have inadvertently put this first line in here. I will double check it. And I'm sorry if that does not seem to go along with, I was talking about it, but not really looking at what I put in here. So I apologize. I will double check and see what I was talking about, and
okay.
It appears that I would remove that one.
Yeah.
This is just a basic diagram of master detail, which is that you have a parent and that you have the children, basically. So it's a one-to-many relationship. So then we have another very common relationship, and this is called the lookup relationship. And basically, it links any two objects together, but there's no security or data deletion issues around if you remove that link. It's just helpful because it allows you to relate things, so you can have related lists, and you can tie things together from a reporting standpoint, and just being able to see things much clearly, more clearly on a page layout in one area where, and obviously if things just naturally relate to each other, lookup relationships are fantastic. I use them a lot. So it's not automatically deleted, like I said. There's no inherited sharing, so security, things like that. Now, one thing that you do want to look out for, and this is because I like lookup so much, I run into this problem, which is that standard, what I found as the standard is that you can get up to 25 lookup fields. I do know that if you are in good with Salesforce, you can massage a little bit, but you don't want to have so many that you're causing problems with redrawing pages or any connection stuff.
So we had some chat going on. The reason for two lookups.
Oh yeah.
You were on a master detail slide, so you can only have two master detail.
Okay. Yes. Right. I just didn't. I missed
that
out.
I missed that too. That we were talking master detail. So that's perfect.
So that's great. People are helping me out where I'm missing. You do not, in a lookup relationship, that field does not have to be filled out. And that one is very basic. There's really just the two things connect to each other. So a many-to-many relationship. So this is super handy when you have things that don't relate, or that don't relate directly, or you might have a situation where you need to, I think of a situation where, maybe you have an object where you house legal information, like case information, right? There's a court case, and as a company, you might want to keep track of your litigations, right? So you may have a contact with an attorney. They can be related to multiple accounts, and they might be related to multiple multiple litigations, right? So you need to create a scenario where you can have them connected in multiple different ways. So to do this, you actually create a junction object. So then you have master detail relationships to the other objects, so basically one of each of those to the other objects that tie to that junction object. And then you can utilize the junction object to keep track of things and use that as your related list, a report out of that. So there's some of those things are in a junction object, there are not security, it's not an impact on security or access. Well, that's the same thing. Sorry. And there's not an impact necessarily when deleting records, because the way that you set up the master relationship is different, so it doesn't behave the same way. And then you can only go, I don't think I put it on here, but I think there's limitation on how many levels you can go deep on that. Lookup fields are not required. You still have the standard limitations on the number of lookups, and obviously don't get yourself into trouble like I have using too many, but there's not a required lookup. So it's really just more of a helpful object to link things that are not necessarily specifically related that you need to have multiple connection points to. And that's very basic. I hope everyone loves my paint skills.
You did a great job.
So then there's a couple others that are not quite as standard. So there's something called an indirect relationship. So this has to do with external lookups. I've never used these. I just apparently never worked with anything that, any situation where I would need to utilize these. You use some other tools to get data in and out, and so we don't have direct lookups. So what you can do is you can link some indirect lookup links. Maybe it'll make more sense if I actually show you the slide. So an indirect lookup is one where you have external objects that are children of an internal object, okay? And I have not found a use case for this. Terry, I don't know if you ever have.
Sorry, let's say you've got a set of data that lives outside of Salesforce, and you're wanting to, if you have I forget the license that it is, I think it's like an external license, it's a specific license type you have to have that allows you to, from within Salesforce, connect to that external set of data. You end up creating this, it's called an external object. It looks and feels a lot like a Salesforce object, but the data physically lives outside of that in another system of some sort. So when you're creating your fields on that external object, you're going to link that to something internal.
So, and that would go along with some of the stuff that I was doing when I was researching, where I was talking about how things you need to consider when you create this kind of indirect lookup, and also the external lookup, which I'll talk about real quick in a second. But both of those things talked about syncing. That you need to make sure that, because people may not necessarily understand that the data is not, inside of our org. To them, it doesn't look like, they don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, it acts and operates very similar to as if it did live inside your org, but technically it's not. So there's some, because of that, there are some limitations that are a little bit different. So.
Okay. I don't know how many people use this or how often it comes up. It has never come up for me, and neither has the external lookup, which is kind of the inverse of the other, and that is an external parent and then internal children. If anybody has any other use cases that they know of, I've just never seen this. So I'm providing the information because it was there among my study materials, but even then, there just seems to be a lot less information around these types than there were around the master details and the lookup and the many-to-many. There is one more, and it's specific only to user. It's only on the user object, and it's called hierarchical. and it basically is a user to another user. I hear a lot about it being used to maybe say someone who's a manager of another person. However, there's already manager in Salesforce, so I've not quite understood the specific role of that, or maybe it reports to, but it's outside of the parameters of a normal role. It's only available here. It's like a lookup, but it's a lookup from a user to user, because you can't put anything else on a user. That's it. Have you ever used that for anything?
It seems like I did it once, and it was some obscure reason for it. I don't know if it was like a territory-related thing. Is that what
That's why I've used it.
Yeah.
Yep. Or like I wanted to assign a support representative to someone, like another user. So I created a hierarchical lookup to another user, and it just labeled it support rep. Yeah.
Perfect. That's actually a great example for me, because I was not able to find any. Just one. Oh,
I lost your screen.
Yes, I lost your screen.
Yeah. Sorry about that. It's trying to reconnect. I don't know what happened there. Just a couple other things to note. Okay, so some things to think about when you are wanting to set up these connections and relationships. You can't do that between standard objects. Be mindful of when you are wanting to delete records, that if you have not specifically outlined the ability to reparent, that those records will be gone. In a master detail, you can only have 3 levels. And then also, so you can do some conversion of data between types, but it becomes a muddy mess because if you don't have information filled in and the conversions don't work correctly, and they don't necessarily suggest that you change lookups after you create them.
You're talking about switching from a master detail to a lookup or vice versa?
Right,
Okay.
yes, sorry. And then it does, you actually can't go to a master, but you can go the other direction.
You can go both ways, but you have to have data in every field.
Right.
You're going to go back to master.
Okay, which is actually, it's not up there, but that was actually my last item here. So I apologize, there's so much more information than this about all the specifics. This was just tip of the iceberg for everything that I found, but I wanted to keep it high enough level that we could have a discussion and people could basically understand the kind of the data modeling aspect of it. I did find a few good resources, and I did put them in this slideshow that I found things that were helpful to me, and so they'll be available on the slides.
Awesome. Very good. Nice job, Kevin. Any questions for Kevin? You guys are such a quiet user group. All right, I believe, is it Tanner? I think you are up with our next topic, if I remember right.
That's correct.
All right, creating and deleting custom fields.
Should I see a pop-up to share my screen?
Oh, sorry, no, I was about to ask, it's getting awkward silence. On the Zoom meeting down at the very bottom, there should be a toolbar, and right in the middle is the share button.
There we go.
Yep, that's coming. And we see Salesforce org.
Okay. Let me close this guy. So yeah, I had the creating custom fields and deleting custom fields. So we'll start our course here. Just some backgrounds. I have some screen recordings on here, so you're going to see some videos going on a org that I created over the summer. I just started using the data import wizard, and I was preparing for my fantasy football drafts. So I found NFL spreadsheets and imported them into my playground. So that's why you're going to see probably names if you follow the NFL out there. So just so you know. So creating custom fields. Custom fields allow you to capture the business data that you need that don't necessarily match the standard fields available in Salesforce. When creating a custom field, you can configure the format, type of data, who can see the field, where it's displayed on the page layout, and offer help text. We call them tooltips here to help the user fully understand what that field is showing them. So creating a custom field, fields are related to a specific object in Salesforce. So in order to create a new field, you'll go to the Object Manager section in Setup and select the object your field will live on. You'll navigate to the Fields and Relationship tab to open up the fields available on that object, and then up in the right-hand corner, you'll click New to create a new custom field. So we'll start that. Actually, we'll pause that. The first thing you do is you choose the field type or format. So I'm going to open up this link. This Salesforce, I guess, link or page shows all the different types of fields that you can choose from. I'm not going to go into every single one here because there's a lot, but this is great to look at. So if you're looking to have a field that's currency, use that type. There's pick lists, there's numbers, percentages, all that. So I'd recommend going out and looking at those. For my demonstration, here's the where you pick your type. I'm going to use the pick list. I'd recommend, if you can use a pick list for your type for your users, I would do it because it keeps your data clean. You don't have a free text field that your users can put whatever they want in the field. So when you go to report on and you can group things together, it's a lot easier and a way to analyze your data. Plus, the users really like to just be able to pick something rather than type something in. So the next part here is to enter the details. So you have your field label here. That is what your users will see when looking at it on the UI. You have a couple options here too with the pick list. Use global pick list value set or enter values with each value separated by a new line. The global pick list, I've never seen this before, but I guess the pick list that you can create by itself and use on different objects or creating different fields that you can basically not have to redo them every time. I don't really see why you would use that because it's so easy to create these pick lists. Like you'll see, you just enter what you want for your pick list and hit enter for every line here. So this situation I'm creating, oh, sorry.
Anybody, what would be a value of using a global over individual? Any thoughts on that?
So we, very specifically, we have an issue right now where we have different pick lists for many different objects around states and provinces.
Oh, yeah.
There's also some like county and things like that. And so we have to go like 10 different places to fix these things right now. And they're so embedded that they're on reports and they're here and there, and now we're down the path where if we would use a global pick list, we would have been much better off.
Yeah, so it just gives you a single place to manage a set of pick list values if you're reusing it. So something like gender, you might have that on a variety of different places or states and countries, that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
You might see
Yeah,
those other places. So
I even think of long pick lists too. I was just thinking short pick lists. So yeah, if you have 50
yeah.
that you use,
Yeah.
That would be a bummer.
One thing to keep in mind about the global pick list values, I don't think they're available in Flow, which is hard to use, or they're going to be in Winter 20 available. I'm not sure, but I tried using global pick lists in Flow, and I had an issue with that. So one thing to look into if you are going to move to global pick lists, you might want to check that out.
Interesting.
Okay, so I have my pick list options here, and then you have a couple options down here below if you want to display values alphabetically. Use the first value of default, but I'm just going to keep it with no default here and keep the order. And then a description of your field, pretty useful to keep a good idea of what your field is showing the user. And then with the help text box down below, I just copied and pasted the description in there. So when the user is seeing it on the page layout, they can hover over the tooltip help box just like that and see a description of what the field is. And then there's a box to say always require this field when entering it on a contact. Here's the next step, which is the field level security. So you're picking and choosing who can view or has read-only access for all these different profiles that you have out there. I will say with that field level security too, if they can't view it, they won't be able to view it at all in the org. So if they're going to do a report on that object, they won't be able to see that field to report on. And then the next step when creating a custom field is you're picking and choosing which page layouts this will be displayed on for the contact object here. So if this might be like the generic contact layout, and maybe like the sales manager or marketing manager up top have different page layouts on the contact. You can say whether it's going to be on these two and not on the bottom two here, but I'm just going to keep it on all of them. And you hit save, and then you should be taken back out to the object manager, and you should be able to see your field that you just created. So that's creating a custom field.
So Tanner, here's a question for you. On the when you were creating that pick list, you had the option to make it a required field. What's the advantage or disadvantage of using that versus making it required on page layouts?
That's a good question.
Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Well, if you try to do the page layouts, there's advantages to either way. You may require it. Somebody might have the same page layout, one profile as another, but they do the different business processes, so they may need to actually enter that information, whereas the other group might not know it, and they're waiting for their step. That would be the advantage of doing it at the page layout level. But you may have a situation where, from a compliance standpoint, you have to have this very specific number or something like on a claim, and you may need that to be entered in by anyone that touches the record, and you won't let them go out of, save any changes in the record without it, and that's like across the board, no matter what.
Yeah, okay, good. Any other thoughts?
In just personal experience, I've found that having it required on the field level can break integrations if for some reason that field just isn't populated, and it will just stop an integration from happening or continuing. So I usually advocate for just my own personal best practice is to always try to do it on the page layout, unless, like Kevin said, it was a compliance type thing where it has to be filled in, but I try to always just do it on the page layout.
Yeah, I always kind of describe it as one's at the database level. So if you're defining it at the time that you're creating the field, every record has to have that value in it. If you do it on the screen, then it's really more on the UI. It's just whenever somebody creates or saves that particular record, then it becomes required at that point. So good.
Okay. deleting the custom fields. So you have 15 days to change your mind, basically. So what you're seeing on the screen is what is prompted when you go to try and delete a custom field. It kind of talks about, in order to preserve a record of data for future reference, run a data export before deleting custom fields by clicking data export. So you could do that to like back up your data just in case you change your mind past the 15 days. And this just says you have 15 days, and then it'll be permanently deleted from your org. And I have a little section here. So you just simply go to the field that you want to delete. So that's the one I just made right there. Hit the little box, delete, and there's that prompt that you'll get here. So, say you're in the 15 days and you want to resurrect that field. So I have a little joke here. Frankenstein's monster was famously brought back from the dead by harnessing the power of lightning. Ironically, you cannot use Salesforce Lightning to bring your recently deleted grave. You have to go to Salesforce Classic. I had to get Kevin and Carla's help to figure that out because it was driving me nuts. So I simply went over here, changed my view to Classic, which really screwed me up because I am not used to anything in Classic. Came out here, typed in the contact object, and they have the fields right there. And if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom, you'll see deleted fields. And that's where you can undelete a field that you've recently deleted. Any questions on any of that?
What are the 3 different types of ways you can capture text?
Oh, I thought there was 4.
Well, then maybe there is 4. What are they? You might be right.
These
oh yeah, encrypted. I didn't think about encrypted. You're right.
So I think it goes into how many characters you're going to allow with your text field. And then also this text area, the rich, I see that you can, is there 5? Oh, yeah. Shoot.
Right. Yeah. I failed that question. Very good. So rich text area, long text.
Yeah, the rich, obviously you can do a lot more with it as far as your fonts. You can upload images, indents. So it looks kind of like almost like writing an email or a Word document capabilities. But the other ones I'm looking at, it's just the characters.
Yeah.
Anything else we should
there? On the text field, there are a couple options that are a little bit different and unique that isn't available on some of the other field choices. One of them is an external ID checkbox. Anybody familiar with what that means or when you would leverage that particular option on a text field? Carly, you want to take that one on?
Yeah, I didn't want to answer unless somebody from the group.
I know. I didn't want to hear myself talk. So.
We use it on everything. So all of our data comes in from outside sources. So we have an external ID on every object, so that our integration knows whether to delete the record or to insert the record for upserts. So it's an ID field to track external record, like external data from outside. I don't know if I said that right. So we integrate with the SQL database, and we want to tie all of the records in our Salesforce with an ID so that we can trace it back to our SQL database. Does that make sense?
Yep. Right. So you use an ETL tool and use that as your key then, basically?
Correct. Yep, that's exactly it.
So then when you're doing, let's say you're loading data into your org, and you're doing that, you're able to, instead of using a Salesforce ID, use that external ID as your identifier. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, another thing that I doubt will be on this particular test, but when you mark a field as external, it also places an index on that field. So if you're needing to improve some performance items, that's kind of a sneaky way to improve performance as well.
That's true, and there are options under external ID, so you can make your field case sensitive, or the index like insensitive. So that's kind of nice too. A couple extra options when you check that box.
Yeah. Good. Any other thoughts on fields? You guys are doing fantastic. You're running right at 20 minutes each, and
I cut mine off. I didn't show you actually how to create their relationship.
All right. You can go ahead and stop sharing, Tanner, if you're finished, and then we will is it Laura?
Laura, yes.
You'll take over.
So hello everyone. I haven't been on the call since the first one. This is unfortunately the one time a week where I have something at the exact same time every week also, so it's been a struggle. Also, before I get into this, I want to share this is pretty bare bones because yesterday I took my exam and I thought I'd share that experience because I did not pass. I failed by what I have equated to like 1 or 2 questions. So it was a close one. But it was an eye-opening experience. Kevin and I had a conversation this morning about it, and I thought it'd be valuable to talk about just briefly.
Yeah, please do.
And so
don't share questions.
I won't share questions, but I think that I walked in knowing it was going to be difficult, knowing that the majority of the questions were going to be scenario-based, but not to the detail and the level that they were. So having talked to a lot of people, right, there's questions where you have to select the 3 best answers out of 5 answers and that kind of thing, but all 5 answers are sometimes correct in their own way, so you have to break that down. So that required a level of detail that I just hadn't put into my studying for certain topics. There were certain topics that I breezed right through. But I think what I did is I tried to take a strategic approach towards studying, which was based on like how heavily weighted certain sections were, which I think is smart. But that meant that I didn't spend the amount of time on some of those lower sections that then I got to those questions and the degree of detail that I needed to know, I just hadn't dug that deep. So what I would say first of all is like dig deep into every topic. I think everyone wants to approach it with a strategic mindset, and yes, there are certain sections, Kevin and I were talking, that like I didn't need to spend that much time on because I have a lot of knowledge and experience with them. We
decided that put us together, we're damn good.
We would absolutely crush it, yes. Separate, not so much. But I think really what I've done is like in this study group, I think we focus on like concepts, right? And I took a Salesforce prep like 6-hour webinar where at the end of it they said, if you feel good about this, like you're good to go. Like go ahead and take the test. Now it came straight from Salesforce, so I fully believed it because I felt great. None of that was new knowledge. But the application piece, I would say, and just the tiny little pieces, like when you're reading on, Trailhead and you're reading some of those like little tiny details that we tend to skim over, those tiny details are everywhere on the exam. Like every single question is almost a tiny detail question. Very few are concept driven.
Right, and if it's 3 out of 5, you got to get all 3 of those.
Yeah.
If you miss, you get 2 out of it doesn't count.
Yeah.
It's all or nothing.
So it was a humbling experience. I mean, I came very, very close, so I feel good. Obviously, next time I don't think that it'll be an issue, but that has also been my focus the last couple of weeks trying to get ready for that. So this is pretty basic, which is a pretty basic topic. So page layouts, record types, and business processes.
Well, before we go into that too, when you several of you are looking to take the exam that are a part of this group, and I can promise you that by going through this study group, if this is the only thing you're looking at and thinking you're going to be ready to go, just by watching or participating in these sessions, you're probably not getting to that level of detail. Kevin hit today and Tanner on different aspects, and there are levels much deeper that you're right, you're going to have to know. And the only way you're going to get that is by getting in there and doing that hard work of studying, reading through the material.
And I will say one thing to add on to that is also using the Trailhead Playground, aggressively, I think would have helped, right? Especially for me, I'm not working with as an admin or anything like that currently. This is something that I'm striving for, and I work with our Salesforce team a lot. So I know a lot of the book learning about it, right? I know a lot of the basics for sales and marketing applications and that kind of thing. But I think if I had spent more time just in the playground, messing around with things just as much as possible, I know of at least 5 questions that I wouldn't have sat there and stared at the computer screen and been like, what am I supposed to do with this question even? So those are just, if anyone hasn't taken it yet and is interested in taking it, is scared, don't mean to scare you more because I came close, but it is very detail oriented.
Very good, thank you.
Unfortunately, this presentation is not detail oriented because of that.
All right, we'll go through it.
So let's start with page layouts. So when we're looking at page layouts versus record types, and all of these things are obviously interrelated, page layouts determine what the user sees. So which data is displayed to which users on object record pages. So it's the user experience, what they actually visualize. So that includes buttons, fields, as controls, visual force, custom links, related lists, that kind of thing. Page layouts also determine visible versus read-only versus required fields, so ties into Tanner's presentation a little bit there. Page layouts can be applied to groups of users to only show relevant data. So you could have one record type with multiple page layouts if you don't have the need for those multiple record types. So we'll talk about what the reasoning is for having multiple record types versus multiple page layouts. So really, page layouts is very basic, right? It's what you see. It's the fields that are available, it's the objects on the page. You can only apply one page layout to a group of users per record type. So for each group, they can only have one page layout for that record type. So the example I use is if you only have one record type in opportunities, you can only apply one page layout per profile type. Salesforce, this is a recommendation, and I put this in here. I put this in here following the exam because there were some very specific numbers in the exam and recommendations and things like that. So I was I'll throw some of those extra tips in there. Salesforce recommends creating no more than 200 page layouts. Technically you have unlimited. You can create unlimited page layouts, but based on use case, Salesforce has said that's a bad experience for everyone.
I would think that'd be a bad experience for any admin.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was reading after I read that part, I was reading some horror stories about how things spiraled out of control. So 200 sounds like a lot, but you can technically actually create an unlimited number, which also sounds horrifying. So this ties into what Tanner was talking about with the field level security to restrict user access to fields. So a page layout can decide whether a field is visible or not, but that doesn't mean that user doesn't have access to that field. So that'll still show up on reports and that kind of thing. So if you want to completely restrict the visibility of that field across all of Salesforce, you need to use field level security and not page layouts. Also, one tip that came from Salesforce that makes sense is that there's a mess if you don't consider the tab key order. So if you're on a page layout and you're not considering like where your tab will go to next, that can create problems down the line. So that seemed like a very helpful tip from Salesforce to me. So the difference then you'll see between page layouts and record types is that record types allow you to offer different things to different users. So that includes business processes. Business processes and record types are tied to one another. If you're offering multiple pick list values, separate pick list values, then you want to go with different record types versus page layouts. So page layouts, you cannot offer separate pick list values. That's just one pick list for those page layouts. And also, different record types, you can offer different page layouts within those. So the 3 questions essentially to ask yourself to determine if you need those record types. And Salesforce says, you know, don't create record types just to create them. If you can create a page layout instead, always err on the side of page layout. But ask yourself, do we need different business processes for these different record types? So lead status, opportunity stage, and more. Do we need to be able to show a subset of values from a pick list field? So do you need to show different pick lists on different records? And do we need group records or individual users to see different page layouts within that? So if you answer yes to those, then create a new record. If your answer is no, you can create a page layout and just guide the user experience that way. If one profile needs to see 2 or more different page layouts on the same object, then you need to create 2 or more record types. So you need to create as many record types as you need page layouts on the same object. So some basic tips around that then. If certain user profiles only need to see one page layout, then that's when you focus on assigning just a specific page layout. So I always go with examples. If you only ever need to see that one opportunity page layout, don't add multiple record types. That's just a waste of time and effort. You cannot deactivate a record type if it's in use for an email to case or on-demand email to case by an email routing address. So you can totally deactivate record types if it's not tied to those pieces, but because of that communication piece, you cannot deactivate those. When it comes to if you're dealing with marketing users a lot and campaigns, record types can only be assigned to campaign members using the campaign member type field on campaign. So you have to add that field to the page layout in order to automatically assign a record type to that user. Does that make sense? Okay. And this is common sense, but I also, while I was doing some reading, saw some really terrible things. Make record types only when they can be easily differentiated by the user instead of the admin. So I think on an admin level, it's a different language, right? You're speaking a different language, you can easily differentiate. But if you can't title 2 different record types, different things that make sense to the user, then it's not a good use of record types. Generally, then you can attack that with a page layout. Like if you're having a hard time differentiating what those record types are, you probably don't need more than one, truthfully. So another couple of pieces about creating record types. If a user can see all accounts, they can see all record types. So record types do not control access, they just control what you see. And they should be created in this specific order. So first you create the page layout, then you create the pick lists with all available values, and then you create the record type. So you can assign the page layout and the pick list to it. That's the way you need to follow that process. A couple other pieces about using record types. Process Builder does not directly support record type lookups. So from what I read, I couldn't find specific details, but like there's a way around that, but it doesn't directly support that. So do you know what the way around that is?
Throwing that out to the group. Anybody want to take a stab? Okay, so if I'm creating a record with Process Builder, a lot of times what I will see people do that makes me cringe a little bit is I'll just use the record type ID and plug that in. So this, I'm creating an account of type customer, record type customer, and they'll just hard code in the customer record type ID. There are ways to get around doing that. I don't know that you're going to run in. I can't imagine you run into it. Did you see anything like that on the exam?
No, I didn't see anything like that.
Yeah, then I think I don't want to go into the details of how to get around that one, but
I just saw it mentioned multiple times that there are ways around it.
Yeah, there are.
But I couldn't find examples of it, and I didn't see anything like that on the exam.
All right, then we won't worry too much about it.
Great, perfect. So then each profile needs a default record type on objects that have more than one type available, so you have to set a default. You set visibility of new pick list value sets for each record type. And then there's a difference between Classic and Lightning for this. So Classic automatically applies the user's default record type during lead conversion. So when you're converting leads, Classic automatically applies that default record. Lightning allows you to select the record type for account, contact, and opportunity when you're converting the lead. So that, I'd say that's a pretty significant difference between those two. So just to hit on those pieces again, when to use page layouts versus record types. Use record types when you need records to have different processes, pick list values, or multiple page layouts to reveal those different pick list values. You use page layouts if you want different fields shown to different users, so super basic there. If you have required fields for certain users, but they're not required for others, that can be taken care of in page layouts. If you want to hide or display related lists, fields, buttons, etc., that's page layout. You can hide or display that way. Again, just note that those fields don't go away everywhere, just on that page layout. And then also use page layouts if you want to make certain fields read-only for only certain users.
So talk about the sales process piece of it.
So, business processes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, good, you got it. No, perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. You hit all of them.
So business processes allow you to track separate life cycles or progress along stages. And a business process can be associated with more than one record type. It's always associated with at least one, but it can be associated with multiple. And there are 4 business processes available. So sales processes, lead processes, support processes, and solution processes. So those track all different life cycles. There are ways to work with multiple business processes at the same time. I did not understand what I was reading when I was reading that. I got down the rabbit hole a little bit with that one.
So when you set up a business process, you have to assign you'll assign it to a record type, and so I'm assuming what they're suggesting is, depending on the record type you choose, when you're creating your account, that it could have a different process.
Multiple record types, yeah. Multiple processes, yeah. Okay.
But when I've gone through this with others before, that process of setting that process up, it's very similar across all of these objects. So most of the time people are more comfortable with it from an opportunity stage standpoint. But if you're doing cases or you're doing leads, it really kind of works pretty much exactly the same way. It's just a different object. So you kind of learn one, in essence, you can kind of leverage it on all of them. So.
Good. So then when you're working with record types and process pick lists, this is separate from processes built within Process Builder, so that was a note everywhere because I think some people get confused by that. And this is built on lifecycle fields, so stage and status fields. Record types implement business processes through page layouts. So while you have the record type and you have to have that to have a business process, then that shows up differently based on your page layout. So they all work together. There are pick lists used exclusively for business processes that are not available for record types. So there's 4 different types of pick lists that are not available for record types since they're process specific, and those are opportunity stage pick lists, case status pick lists, solution status pick lists, and lead status pick lists.
So what that means then is that normally if you're working with a pick list, you can go into the record types and make adjustments to which values show up.
Yeah.
But you're not able to do that on these particular ones.
Those 4. Those are the only 4 that are separate. So yeah, while you're assigning
you
pick
filter down
lists.
or pare down in this case, right?
Yeah, not from the record type, you
Not
have to
yet.
go to the
Has
sales
to go to the
process.
Okay.
So those, and it's only those 4, all other pick lists you can set up the same way through the record type, but those are kept separate because they're specific to the process. And that is what I have for those 3 pieces.
Wow, look at that, 3 minutes left. Any questions at all on this topic?
I was just going to add something, which is that record types can also help you when it comes to security.
Mm-hmm.
Hiding and sharing records, you can utilize those. I mean, it takes other things, layers along with that, but also you can limit who can create record types as well.
Yes. Yeah, very good, very good. So next week, if there's no other questions, we have our next 3 presenters are up, talking more about sales process and sales productivity, and then price books. Those are all, looks like 14% weighted.
I will say this,
big
everyone
topics.
should pay attention to price books.
Pay attention to price books. Yeah, for sure.
I need to pay attention to the next 4 sections. I'm weak on sales and marketing.
All right, so if you're wanting to work ahead, what I will do for October 9th is we'll just start back. Actually, I'll probably, Carla, if you want, you and I can take October 9th, and then we'll just start back over at the top of the list and work our way down.
Sounds good. I'll take campaign management if you want.
All right. And, all right. Any questions then for today? Hearing none, I will stop recording and we will call our meeting done for today.
Thanks, Harry.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.